Welcome to the Vision Gap Show. Align your big idea and vision with a plan of action to resonate and stand out in your market. With your hosts, Andy Halko and Tony Zayas.
All right, so we're going to go kind of high level today, Andy.
Let's do it.
Yeah, it's been a while that we've talked, on one of these shows, and but I think we want to dive into kind of the core concept that we've dealt with. You've had the consultancy for 22 years now. Again, this is pretty high level stuff. The concept of the vision gap is something that you've identified and talked about. In the past, we've had a show that we went into that concept, but I do think that is the starting point of this topic and this conversation. Do you want to just paint the picture?
Yeah, I'd love to. This was something that was a culmination of years of working with companies. So probably, again, I've been in this business 22 years. I think it was 8 or so in that this started coming together. And the big thing that drove it was that I would go into a lot of these organizations, and we started out with marketing, web design, and that. But what you would find is this lack of alignment, lack of definition in who they were, what made them different, who their target audience was. And it was amazing to me how many times I would go into an organization and you'd interview a number of folks, and it would just be these different viewpoints and visions, and sometimes even extremely misaligned from each other. And so I started really thinking about this concept of the vision gap of, the leader, the owner, the founder, or even the leadership team has this idea in their head of where they want the company to go, what they want it to look like, where is that point on the horizon that they want to reach as an organization. But that's not always communicated well to their internal team, to potential customers, and even existing customers. And so there's this misalignment, there's this vision gap. And it really came from the fact that, sometimes these leaders weren't able to properly articulate their vision. It was in their head, but they could never communicate it succinctly or in a way that was easy for people to understand. And then other times it just came from the fact of it was in their head and they did a bad job of communicating it on a regular basis that no one really understood.
Mm. Yeah, and I think stepping back from that, we talk a bit about the idea of strategic planning, growth planning, all that, and where does this all fit? And I really think that this is somewhere in between. It's not considered a whole lot, right? So there is that vision that, founder gets an idea, a concept, partners might come together, they meet, and there's, you hear the stories of the entrepreneurs that come together and there's a barroom napkin that they scribble some notes on and write. And that's the idea that they take out into the world. So starting from that, sheet of paper, the challenge often is how do you then further define that as you bring other people into it? There's going to be internal, partners, other stakeholders, then there's going to be team members, then you're going to be externally. So how do you take it from that concept and move it outward? So I think that's where a lot of the challenges start to arrive. So even before you get into that strategic planning mode, you have to have a number of things defined. But how would you address that? How do you align those pieces?
Yeah, and I think you got a couple big major problems, right? The one person in a room with a blank sheet of paper. And this often happens when there's a single founder, but you'd be amazed how many times I'm in a company of 80 people, and the way that strategy is built is that one person sitting at their desk, blank sheet of paper, and just thinking, and they're writing stuff down. And this is a really bad way to do strategy because you're missing a lot of valuable input. You're starting sometimes in the wrong place, or you don't have the right knowledge. And so I really think one of the major challenges that you have to overcome is, how do you take strategic planning, creating a vision, growth ideation out of this silo, out of this void, and make it something that truly is more collaborative. It's structured so you know exactly how to move through it. And a lot of founders aren't trained in methodologies. Yeah, they go out and read books, and there are some courses and things, but the amount of times that I've seen someone read a book that tells you how to do it, and then they try and do it, it doesn't work. And so, they don't have a structured process, so they're just kind of randomly scribbling ideas. And so really moving from that one person in a room to a more structured, this is how we create strategy in a logical progression, and collaborative, where we're bringing more people in. That's really where I think growth-minded companies can excel, is when they take it out of that concept of being a silo and in a empty space.
Over the years, your and our approach to like how that is done has evolved. So how do you address this? Like, how do you pull these pieces together? If you're in a room with others, how does this happen? And then,
well, and that was a big part of what I did with consulting. Is I had this challenge, this vision gap, and these problems, and I was always trying to figure out, how do you solve it, right? And so the first approach for me was, in consulting, just coming up with a structured process that was exercises that then progressed on top of each other, so that you could walk into an organization with a very clear approach to say, this is how we're going to think about our company. And it would start often with those personas, like, who are we targeting? Competitors, what's going on in the market? Take that information and then process it through to be able to come out with things like core values, mission, vision, value propositions, positioning statements, but all very structured. And transparently, over time, I started turning those exercises into more virtual ones, where we could even do it in Excel as a team, right? And that's where we are today has come, is that, now I've taken a lot of that and put it into strategic planning platform, frictionless, where now those exercises and that process that took me 10 plus years to develop is now something that's accessible for anyone to go in and be able to walk through that same process and still do it collaboratively, because it allows everybody to log in and in real time be involved in that strategic planning. So it's been a really interesting evolution over the years of seeing this huge problem, solving it in a very hands-on way where we work with organizations. And now I've really tried to turn it into something that is, accessible beyond me being in a room with a group of folks walking through that process with them.
Because at some level, every challenge in this issue. So how do you go then from that point of here collaboration, like, okay, we're gonna put everyone in a place where they can collaborate and ideate. How do we make sure that there are not the disconnects, right? Everybody going in a different direction. How do you maintain, provide and then maintain the alignment?
Well, and that's what I always talked about with the vision gap is, one of the first steps is obviously to go through this planning process, go through this ideation, be able to better articulate your vision and where you want the organization to go, why it's different. So you have to be able to articulate it first. But then the next step is evangelizing. And evangelizing is bringing your team in and making sure that they not only have heard it once, but they are ingrained in it and they've heard it multiple times. Because the other challenge that I've definitely seen with strategic planning is it's a once a month or once a quarter meeting where the leader is coming in and saying, this is what we're doing. And then after that, it's very discombobulated of, telling this leader do this, and that person's pushing other people, and people lose sight of that bigger vision and what's being, where they're being driven. And so I think it becomes part of this fact that there needs to be a way to indoctrinate these folks and get their vision out constantly to them every single day. And so again, kind of looking at building an online platform like Frictionless, it gives that ability to bring your entire team in and give them access on a daily basis to what is that big picture that you're trying to achieve. And so you move away from this idea of the quarterly meetings or a bunch of random documents in a file share that are disconnected to a centralized collaborative space where the strategy and the vision stops being something that is, randomly thrown at people at different times to being something that is a constant space of activity.
Yeah. And I think that what you're describing, right? So you have that leader, that visionary that's painting the picture. And even if they're pulling, their leadership team in, those team members then go out. If they have people that, within their teams, they're then responsible for telling that story and articulating it appropriately. And everyone's going to do that differently. So you're going to lose that consistency. And ultimately, you're going to lose that initial message when you don't have something to keep everyone involved, aware, aligned. And so it's going to cause problems if you're not maintaining this. And I do think that this whole concept really goes back to everything that happens in that strategic planning process. And it includes things like mission, vision, values. And it's super important. I think that those are easily lost. That people often will, team members, right? Employees will kind of not buy into it if they're not understanding how it all connects. And the strongest teams are the ones that feel like they are all in it together, focused on a mission, marching in the same direction. And that's how do you do this? Well, you have to properly tell that story and align those team members. So it's a challenge. Again, these are foundational challenges that pretty much everybody's dealing with. And it's exciting to work in this area and build out a platform that addresses this.
It's always funny to me when I work with companies. There are some companies where you'll go in and you have different meetings with folks, and there's every meeting someone says, "Oh, that's the first time I've heard this." And it always gets me, and it's always funny to me, is there are companies where when you're in meetings with them, no one ever says that. And there are companies where for some reason that is always a statement that happens in every single call. And it's one of these weird little things that I've noticed that certain companies where it's a very siloed vision, siloed strategy that only certain people know at times, and it filters down through eventually. But a lot of times you have that problem.
Yeah, and that leads to a bunch of disconnected ideas, and
everybody's moving in a different direction.
Yeah, and how do you pull that all together? Because that's what you have to march forward. So,
yeah, I think that is the most important thing. Is for an organization to be successful, everybody needs to be aligned, headed in the right direction, headed together. And that's the challenge. Is I do often think people are running organizations where a lot of folks are pointed in the wrong direction in the first place, let alone, even if they're together pointing in the wrong direction. And so it's really about how do you get that vision and strategy right, and not just random ideas. And then how do you get everybody aligned towards it? And if you do that, you'll see a stronger organization. You'll see happier people. You'll see goals achieved more often. And that end vision that you as a leader or leadership team wants is more accomplishable because you have everybody pointing in the right direction and working together to get there. And so I do think it's one of those challenges that, a lot of times we overlook because we're so ingrained in the day-to-day of a business. We just want to get things done. We just want to tell people what to do. Like, we've got to go get this done, and here's this initiative. And they don't think about that root problem of just let me first start and get a clear direction, and then make sure everyone understands it in a clear way.
And to that point of like collaboration and buy-in, I mean, I think it's easy to want to say like, okay, let's go execute. These are let's determine those steps and go. But how do you get a team that's really committed? Big part of that is if they're involved in the collaborative process, they have some buy-in. They've become part of it. They're involved in that. And when that happens, there becomes a sense of ownership. And that's when people then truly want to commit to that vision, and they're really in it, for the right reasons. And that's, super important to get to that point. So that whole collaboration and to that point of like inclusion in that process is important to get it right, to have, that team that continues to grow and march in the right direction. I will say, I think there's some things that we definitely in the coming weeks want to dive into in a lot more detail and show the process of how we currently do it. We'll bring up frictionless, kind of show people how we do it, but other ways, there's going to be takeaways, however you want to do it. But this is what we've developed here that I think will be really exciting for people to see. I know this is something that everybody's dealing with, so looking forward to go a little bit deeper into some of these areas.
Yeah, this is great. I think having a venue to talk about vision and strategy and alignment, it's an area that's not talked about enough. And I'm excited to be talking about it on this show and then being able to translate that to, this platform that I've been working on to really help take some of the thoughts around this and turn it into something that anyone can, make their organization more successful with.
Sounds great. We'll dive into this a little bit deeper next time. Take care, everybody.
This episode of the Vision Gap Show has been brought to you by Frictionless. Build high-impact strategy at scale. Create your vision, brand position, and go-to-market strategy. All in a collaborative AI-enabled workspace. Visit frictionlesshq.com to create your free account today.